No se vayan, no se vayan, no se vayan. ¿Qué les pareció la charla? Estupenda, ¿no? Yo creo que aquí se aprendieron cosas maravillosas, sobre todo el hecho de la autenticidad y estar orgulloso de nuestras raíces. Pero niñas, no hay break. Yo creo que las niñitas piensan que esto es como el recreo en el colegio, que sonó el timbre y van todas a la cantina por una Coca-Cola y chismear de que niños les gusta en el colegio, pero no es así. Bueno, vamos a seguir ahora. Voy a presentar a otra queridísima amiga, otra mujer que nuevamente representa como digo yo, la nueva generación latinoamericana en los Estados Unidos que nos internacionaliza. Una mujer que, como bien dijeron hoy, creo que una de las cosas más importantes que tenemos que hacer nosotros como región es dar visibilidad y apoyo al talento latinoamericano, y creo que ella ha realizado una labor estelar con todo el contenido de la revista Latin American Vogue en México, y ella es none other than Karla Martinez de Salas. Un fuerte aplauso, por favor. Hola. All yours. Si me necesitas, me llamas, estoy aquí.
¿Aquí?
Ahí, siéntate ahí, siéntate.
Hola a todos, buenos días. Muchas gracias, Estefanía, Samantha, todo el equipo de Labs por haberme invitado a moderar este panel que para mí es algo súper importante, algo que desde que llegué a Vogue México y Latinoamérica ha sido algo que hemos tratado de cambiar los estereotipos, la inclusión, la diversidad, la belleza, incluirla realmente en la revista, no solo con diseñadores, pero con fotografía, modelos, talento latinoamericano. Y por eso hoy, cuando me pidió Estefanía en noviembre, octubre hacer este panel, pues me dio muchísima ilusión y lo quisimos hacer de una manera diferente, interesante, y bueno, pues me da mucho gusto poder presentar a este panel. Como dijo Rotner, va a ser un poco en Spanglish, English. Primero voy a presentar a Ignacio Murillo, que es mi coworker en Vogue, en el Vogue Global Network. Es el Bookings Director de Vogue US y Global. Nos ayuda muchísimo a nosotros, por lo menos a mí en México me ha cambiado muchísimo la vida de poder contar con él para que nos ayude a apoyar a diferentes talentos latinoamericanos, y también él es responsable por impulsar al talento latino por todo el mundo. Entonces, Ignacio Murillo, ¿dónde estás? Ignacio, como le decimos en la oficina, Iggy, vive en Nueva York. Nació en Michoacán, Morelia, no les voy a decir cuándo, y se vino a vivir a Estados Unidos cuando tenía 10 años, en el 2001. Trabajó muchos años en Harper's Bazaar. No solo es Bookings Editor, pero después descubrí que también es fotógrafo y hacía muchas historias para Harper's US. Y como hace un poquito menos de un año se fue la Bookings Director de Vogue, y bueno, Ignacio era la elección perfecta para este rol, y ahora reporta directo a Anna Wintour y trabaja con todas las directoras de contenido por el mundo, ayudando en Bookings. Bienvenido, Ignacio.
Gracias.
Y bueno, nuestro segundo panelista es Luis Alberto Rodríguez, fotógrafo, creativo, que nació en Nueva York de padres dominicanos. Tiene una historia no muy convencional como fotógrafo, no fue asistente de un fotógrafo, no, de hecho es un trained ballerina de toda la vida. Asistió a la escuela La Guardia en Nueva York, que es una escuela de liberal arts y de los artes, y de ahí salen los mejores talentos. Y después le dieron un premio en the Juilliard School en Nueva York. Hace pocos años cambió de dirección y empezó a hacer fotografía, y Si recuerdan la portada de Serena Williams en Vogue US en septiembre de 2022, Luis Alberto fue el responsable y estoy segura que han visto muchas de sus imágenes porque así como tiene este talento de ser bailarín, también puede dirigir a las personas a las que fotografía con movimiento y siempre tiene un ojo muy distinto. Luis Alberto, ¿dónde estás? Bienvenidos a los dos. Thank you so much for being here. Luis Alberto lives in Berlin, but he was in London, so he traveled far to come see his family. Iggy, I know that it's a really busy time. If you work at Vogue US, which Estefania did briefly with me, you know that your emails are blowing up all day long. And I'm really excited to be here with both of you. And I guess I want to start in conversation because a lot of the people here want to know what was your trajectory like? How did you move from Mississippi to New York City and start as bookings now at Vogue?
Thanks so much for having me, first of all. So I started my career right after I graduated college. I moved to New York without not knowing a single person besides a friend that let me crash on their couch. I started tweeting at the time Laura Brown, who was the executive editor at Harper's Bazaar, to kind of get a job. So I used social media as my platform to kind of get noticed. She luckily responded back saying, call my office. I got an internship there at Harper's Bazaar to be in the art department. But I kind of wanted to be in photo and casting, but I kind of was just like, let me just take what I can get. And I took on that internship. I was there for about 3 months, and I was very lucky. I had nothing to do with this, but the editor-in-chief's assistants got really sick one time, and I got to be her assistant. Somehow she really liked me, and I was offered a position. So like a lot of it has been being there at the right time and luck. So I started as a photo assistant and as the assistant to the editor-in-chief. And then since then, I just kind of was forcing myself into meetings that I didn't belong to, kind of just pitching ideas. And somehow she thought I was talented enough to kind of let me take on the bookings responsibility and then also the visuals. So I was overseeing models and photography for about 7 years until I got lucky again and I got a call to see if I wanted to interview for the global casting position at American Vogue, and after many rounds, it's been like, sorry, I'm like nervous. So it's been like 7 months of the job, and I still don't believe that I kind of landed this job. For half of the time, I feel like I'm living in like a whole lie. But yeah, so that's basically kind of been my little career path in the past 7-8 years.
And I know a lot of people aren't familiar with bookings like this role. So you're responsible for, tell us a little bit about what you're responsible for digitally, video, magazine.
Yeah, so I'm responsible technically for anything model related for Vogue. So I book models for all the fashion shoots, for videos, for even if we're having an event, I let them know like who should be the models that should come. So it's basically kind of like anything to do with models, I'm the person that they come to. For American Vogue, for Mexico, Latin America, and then I also oversee APAC, which is India, Japan, China, and Taiwan.
Thank you. Luis Alberto, you grew up in New York City. Tell us a bit about your very unconventional move into photography and what made you go in that career path.
Bueno, buenos días a todos. Yeah, I have a bit of an unconventional path with photography because I was born and raised in New York City. Mi familia toda es dominicana. Mis padres no hablan inglés. I don't know if I should speak Spanglish or whatever.
Como quiera.
But yeah, I grew. My story is closer to like Billy Elliot than anything else. I was a dancer for many, many years. So I trained as a dancer from age 11 to 21. And then I was one of these kids I grew up in Washington Heights, which is a Dominican neighborhood in New York City. And I was one of these kids that was in these programs to get kids off the street. And they offered dance classes, and from then on, I was offered a scholarship. And I went to the High School for the Performing Arts, which was LaGuardia High School, and then after that, I went to the Juilliard School. So when I was 21, I got offered a job in Germany, and I left Germany when I was 21, and I danced professionally for 15 years before I did anything with photography. So I never planned to be a photographer. It was never much of I didn't really have any plan, really, to do anything else other than dance, because my whole life has been dance. And dance is an all-consuming career. It's not something that was a hobby for me. And when I was in the dance company, we would go on tour, and I was always taking pictures of people on the street. And I had a Tumblr, and I was posting some of these pictures of people, and always getting really good feedback. But my life, I was in such a dance bubble that I didn't really ever have any goal or intention with the pictures. It was just my own thing that I was doing. And then around 2014, 15, I had a friend of mine who's a stylist. And I asked him if I can be his assistant as a stylist. I didn't even really know what that meant, but I was like, it kind of sounds fab. And then he was like, no, you don't want to be my assistant. I think you should really consider taking your photography serious, because I think you're really talented. And so then I was like, I started looking at photo books, and through a community of people that I met through him, I met some people there who were really supportive of me. And I thought I was going to apply to photo school. That never really happened. I applied. I was writing people to assist them. Nobody ever replied. So I just kind of kept on doing my own thing, with no intention, again, of, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I didn't really plan to be working in fashion, really. But then I started to get small jobs in fashion. Clueless. I really was lost. But I think my career as a dancer was really my toolbox, and the discipline that I acquired throughout all those years. And then in 2017, I was recommended to apply to a festival in France for young photographers. And I applied, and I became one of the winners there. And the head of the jury every year they have a new president of the jury. That year was Tim Walker, who's a big fashion photographer. And I won 2 of the prizes. And then from then on, he and others there kind of took me under their wing. And since then, a lot of stuff started to flow. But all of it has been very, very organic and unplanned, but with unrelentless drive. Relentless drive. Yeah.
Thank you. Ignacio, do you feel like you faced any challenges being a young Latino when you first moved to New York to work in fashion?
Yeah, I would say that there was 2 kind of big ones. The first one was not knowing anyone, and then also just not seeing myself or that many Latinos in the industry for me to ask questions or find ways to kind of get involved. And the second big challenge was also for the reason of not seeing myself within the industry, was always kind of second doubting myself of am I good enough, or do I fit in here? So those were I would say the 2 biggest challenges that I faced in New York when I first started.
Did you feel any of that?
To be honest, no. I'm gonna keep it real. For me, my photography trajectory has been incredible. My challenges come from much way before, when I was a dancer, because I come from a family that has no resources, and really son campesinos, and I really crawled my way out of that situation. By the time I started photography, I was much older, and the world had opened up in a different way that it would have if it was even 10 years before. So my trajectory within photography and within getting into fashion has been very naive in a way, because I didn't really have any goal of making it by any means. But a lot of doors have opened up, again, organically. But in terms of like me as a Latino photographer, I haven't faced the same challenges that others have faced. And I think it has a lot to do with the times that we're living in, and opportunities opening up for others that were not opening up before. And I think a lot of it has to do with timing.
Right, I can relate to feeling like, oh my God, what am I doing in this room? I remember when I was an assistant at Vogue, when I interviewed, my old boss, my first boss gave me my resume back, and it had a note from Anna that said, "Wendy, please see me." And I was like, oh my God, what does this even mean? Does this mean that they sent it back? And I think a lot of the times we as Latinos don't kind of make enough noise that we are certainly when I started working in 2002 in New York, I was one of the few Mexicans there. Maybe there was one Greek girl with big curly hair that kind of looked like me, and those feelings of where do I belong? What am I doing here? Even the HR woman asked me, once how someone from El Paso could come to arrive in New York and work at Vogue. And I think part of the conversation of diversity is not just, obviously models, but it's obviously hiring people. And a lot of the times, as you say, you come from a family with little resources, and to live in New York City, to live in London, to live in Paris, like these cities are expensive. So a lot of the times you're getting a certain pool of individuals, right, that can afford to be there. And I think those are things that are changing. I don't know if you see that in the workplace, like with the way that Vogue works now.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel there's like change, because I'm there in a way. Like, I feel like if it hasn't changed, I wouldn't be able to get this opportunity. But that's like a big thing, I think, in the industry in itself of, what am I trying to say? That like everything is like changing, like especially since the Black Lives Matter started to happen, or like big movement. It's like everyone is kind of like, not saying like they woke up, but at least they're paying more attention of what, that they need to be more inclusive and more diverse.
I think right now one thing that Raul was talking about is, building these communities, right? And how, right now you're building your own community through, and that's how you discovered photography. And, Tim brought you in, who's an amazing mentor and an amazing photographer. How do you think that we can continue to, when we were on the phone, we spoke about Rose Cordero or Omaira, which was one of the big models, Dominican models, in like 2004, 2005, we were saying, like, why do you think that was so important at the time? And do you think people realized it was important, or was she just another...
Omaira?
Yeah.
I mean, I think Dominicans realized, the people who knew, but I mean, the reality is, I don't think she was appreciated in Dominican Republic, because Latin America has a very specific idea of beauty. And in order, unfortunately, for a lot of Dominicans to be able to, quote unquote, make it, they have to leave and go be appreciated somewhere else for them to come back, and then people take them serious. I think, in terms of Omaira, I mean, that she was the only one for a good while. And then later on, a few years later, it was like Arlene Sosa, and then it was Rose Cordero. Rose Cordero was the first Dominican black woman to be on a cover of Vogue, but also a different representation of what Latin America is, because the reality is, we talk about diversity, but we talk about Latin America, and we have to be very honest with the fact that, like, if we look at even at the representation here, you know, Latin America is full of black people and is full of brown people. And the idea that we have of Latin America is very Eurocentric. And I think it's very problematic. And I think that we're quite comfortable with it because, you know, I was speaking to you on the phone the other day, like we watch telenovelas, we watch Venezuelan telenovelas, Mexican, and I mean, it's like watching Gone with the Wind. You know, it's really, everybody's white, everyone. And we have to be very honest about that because the history of the world, it does not divorce from what we see today and the reasons why things, I'm saying things are changing for sure, but I think that having someone like Rose back in 2009 was like revolutionary because, you know, it was like shocking for people to see a beautiful black woman on a cover, you know, and that should not be revolutionary in the 21st century, you know, and it's just, and I think that was Rose in like 2010, I think, and then Linnacy. I mean, there was Arlene Sosa too, but then it was like Linnacy in 2005. It was the first person who, 2015, who had her hair worn natural because a white designer allowed her to have her hair natural, which is revolutionary again. And since then, I think that most black models are not wearing pressed hair. They're wearing their natural hair, and that's when the Dominican models come in because Dominican Republic has a wide range of diversity. And, you know, a lot of these girls who have made it big outside of the Dominican Republic were never able to make it big here because the idea of beauty here is an Italian woman. It's not a black woman, and let's keep it real. Like, Dominican Republic is a brown and black country. Like, and, you know, I'm very passionate about it because it's very, I just feel like there's a complete erasure. Como que se olvida la gente, you know? Like there's an erasure of blackness in Latin America that I think is extremely, extremely problematic all around.
Well, in Mexico, I remember they used to say up until a few years ago when they started actually going to the coast of Oaxaca, to the coast of Veracruz, they used to say, es que en Mexico no hay gente morena, or no hay gente negra, and that was not true.
And I'm talking about blackness, but there's also like all the indigenous, you know, in Latin America, like where is it? Where are they? Like I don't see them here, you know? And this is called raíces. It's just something to think about.
Ignacio, for you, in terms of casting, like how do you think we can continue to change this conversation with, you know, you talk to the agents all the time, you know, I was saying on the phone and in our earlier conversations how certain stylists and photographers get fixated on like certain girls, right? And they all want to shoot, you know, like Bella Hadid last season. But in reality, the girl that walked the most shows was America Gonzalez, who's an indigenous model from Venezuela. And you booked her for our cover in October. How do you talk to these agents and, you know, the designers also? I think Vogue has such an important role in this conversation and being more supportive to people of color and in the industry.
I mean, it's just like a lot of pushing them to kind of change their minds. Because the easy route is always, let's book the girl that, you know, can be a chameleon or has millions of followers or that she's white. So I think it's just always having someone in the room constantly pushing and reminding them that there's different types of beauty and that they should just kind of take a chance. Like they always want to take the easy route, like you mentioned. Everyone was so fascinated about Bella, and they just go for those easy access to kind of like, they want everyone to see their pictures. And they think that just because obviously she does have millions and millions of followers, people will see the images. But I just think it's about constantly just keep challenging the people in the room to kind of think different and to also provide the options of like, there's all these other beauties out there that they should be paying attention to.
Do you find the same happens, like that people get, with us, for example, we shoot a lot of up and coming talent that are Latin American, and a lot of people say, oh, we won't loan to her. There's one brand that I won't mention that none of our celebrities are approved. I think maybe we have someone coming up in September that's just now barely approved by the brand. And it's really interesting because, last week, or I don't even know what week it is, but 2 weeks ago at the Loewe show, the celebrities, the models, the people in the front row were really different. And one of the Latinas there was Carol G. And, they have an upcoming project with her. And if I told you the amount of mean, vitriol-filled messages on my Instagram of how Carol, who's a white woman essentially from Colombia, could be associated with a brand like Loewe, you wouldn't believe it. So how do we continue this? I also shot 4 Dominican models, and a female Latina photographer told me that she didn't feel the casting, that she wanted Mi Carganaras. How do we change this?
I know who that is.
How do you think we can continue to...
I mean, I just think if somebody says she doesn't want to shoot the Latin girls, I'm like, don't shoot them. I can't take the fakeness, because it's just kind of like, you can see when something feels forced. And if you don't feel comfortable shooting the white girls, then fine. I mean, if you don't feel comfortable shooting the Latin girls, like that's not your story, and you shouldn't feel like it. And I think that's the thing. There's all this guilt where people feel like, I have to do this because I don't want to get canceled. But I'm just kind of like, all of a sudden it's diversity, diversity, diversity. But for many, many years, these designers in Europe would shoot, you would watch a runway show with 50 models and everybody's white, and they seem to be totally fine with it. So all of a sudden everybody's so afraid of being canceled and not being relevant, so they have to make everybody so diverse. But I just feel like it's so phony, even though I do think it's important to start the change and to include them, because I do think that we should represent all types of people, But I just think that in that specific example, in a way, it's kind of like, then I rather shoot, she doesn't want to shoot the Latin girls, But then I'm kind of like, well, give them to somebody who does want to shoot them, who feels like they really love that subject, And, for me, it's crazy. For example, there's another magazine, which I won't name, they go to Cuba and do a whole story, of Cuba, but they won't use Cuban women, they'll choose a woman from Argentina to smoke a cigar, to be on a cover of a magazine representing Cuba, a white woman, and it's just there's just so much phoniness, and I think that we can't have these conversations and really make a change until we address these things, and so I think that when they say that they don't want to shoot them, it's kind of like, okay, moving on, give it to someone who does, who really will respect it and honor it, because it deserves to be.
And I'm sure the same happens to you, no? I mean, when you propose a list of girls and then we end up having the same model, March, April, it's a constant struggle with the stylists and the photographers and the creative teams involved.
Yeah, and it's so hard because also I tend to take a lot of things very personally, and I'm trying my best not to, because I'm always feel like, why don't you want to shoot this beautiful woman that kind of represents more of where I come from? Sometimes I find it offensive, which I'm trying not to kind of get myself into it. But yeah, it's just so defeating sometimes of why am I here? You don't need me then if you're just gonna constantly keep asking for the same people. You should already have them on speed dial. Why am I here? So as hard as it is, it's I feel like you just have to keep on and sound like a broken record, and then eventually something will kind of somewhat change. But yeah.
And do you feel like this conversation has changed since 2020 when, people were very aware of when Black Lives Matter was happening and people were like, we have to change this? I mean, I think on our end, we have been shooting indigenous models, Black models, Afro-Dominicanas, and I remember during Black Lives Matter, a Honduran stylist wrote to me, not in a mean way. He said, you've done important things like shoot Yalitza and, shoot a lot of Afro-Dominican models, but there's a whole population in Central America and also a lot of the times on the websites, right? You see different girls, and I'll say at Getty, for example, if you're buying stock images, because we unfortunately don't have the budgets to produce images for every single thing that we do, and a lot of the models are white, or a lot of the models don't reflect what the people of our countries look like. So that was something very positive, that a comment that was directed, that was said in the nicest way possible to produce, a good effect, not meanness, and start a dialogue. And I feel like for you, for example, in the digital world, if you have the opportunity to shoot a different range of girls, is that kind of something that you look forward to and that is more exciting?
In a way, yes, and in a way, no, because it's also kind of like, when it comes to digital, they always kind of want the people with the following, so it automatically kind of like guarantees success of like the amount of people are gonna look at it, or the amount of people that are gonna watch it. Everything kind of to me feels exciting every time, because like also to like the battle of like pushing people is exciting to me as much as it feels like a defeat sometimes. But that's, I don't know, it's like every project that I work on, it feels exciting, if that answers your question.
Yeah. What makes you exciting? Because I know that you are selective about who you work with and what projects you take on. How do you, just as an editor also, like how do you obviously have an agent and you're with one of the best agents in the world. How do you decide what you want to do?
In general, I think that for me, I never thought, I've had the opportunity to shoot kind of big celebrities, which was a huge surprise for me, because I'm like, how is this happening right now? And that has just been a general development of my work, which I never really saw coming. But to answer your question, I think a lot of it has to do with the person's history. And I really don't, it doesn't interest me necessarily to shoot someone just because they're famous. I really, if I have the opportunity to choose, and fortunate enough to choose, like I prefer to shoot someone who's really done something, and who has a history, and who has gravitas, someone who really has the trajectory. Like I think there's just many people who are famous to be famous, and who really have done nothing. And I'm just not as interested in being part of that conversation. So for me, it's really an honor to shoot people who I feel have a trajectory of some sort. It doesn't have to be one thing, but yeah, who have something to talk about. Because there's so many people who want, who have a social media presence and everything, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not my world. And I feel more connected to telling stories in terms of like these covers I'm speaking about, because I'm not saying that I only want to shoot famous people, not at all. But when I have those type of opportunities, it's usually people who have, who have a trajectory. And in terms of models, I think a model is a different thing, because, if they're a younger model, they don't have a trajectory. So it's just about, I guess, what I get attracted to. And that can be quite exciting when I see a young model that I'm like, wow, like, I think this person looks very special. But it's always a gamble with young models, because I think that we see them, and beauty is a very powerful thing. But what happens with young models is that you see them, and you notice the agents and the magazines, they project a lot onto these young girls because they think that they can look like something. But when you meet the girl, she's 18. She's 17, and no, she's not sexy and grown. You know what I mean? And so then you get there and you're dealing with a child. You know, you're not dealing with an adult really. And so it's really a gamble because it's fun. Oh, she looks great. But then, you know, what are we really doing here? You know?
And are you choreographing her? A lot of your pictures have movement and...
Yeah, I mean, you know, my background is dance, so that is really my history. So, you know, I didn't know anything about photography. So I just use the information that I know. That doesn't mean that I always want people dancing, but I definitely like to use the physicality, even by the way someone sits or the way, you know, somebody stands, and sort of like see where they look blocked and try to find a way to allow them to feel more comfortable.
What was shooting Serena Williams like?
Serena, I mean, it was amazing. She's not the warmest person on the planet, you know? No, she's cool, but she's not like, hey, you know, she's an athlete. And you see it, when the picture she's there, she does her job and you do it and you go. You know, I have nothing bad to say about it. It was an incredible experience. And yeah, I'm just very, very grateful for the opportunity because I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be shooting, you know, the cover of September Vogue, American Vogue. It's kind of crazy to me, still.
Iggy, you have worked at the two probably most prestigious magazines in the world. And, you know, we were talking about the season where Valentino had 8 Dominican models, I think all led by Linnacy a few years ago. Has that always been something that you've seen, or did you see like a certain shift in 2015?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like shifts. It's like kind of like, I don't want to use these words, but I feel like sometimes fashion feels like there's trends and you see big waves. Like there was like a huge wave of Dominican talent and then it kind of slows down. And then it's like, then they pick, like, I feel like right now there's like a lot of a big wave of like from South Sudan. So yes, I mean, yes and no. It's what I'm trying to say is like, she led this big wave and there was all these other girls and then it kind of stops. I don't know, I'm trying to like ramble and what I'm trying to say, but yes.
It kind of shifts. It goes through different, when in reality it should be more continuous.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you notice, like, how do we encourage young photographers, brands, and media to embrace more roots and heritage, do you think?
I think that in general, people are claiming more their roots these days because I think authenticity is key and people are realizing that. To be honest to who they are and where they come from, this was not the case, I think, years back. Because I felt like, you know, the times are really changing and I think that back in the day, you have to navigate a very white world to do anything, you know, and so anybody who kind of like who's not from that world and enters that world is just an exception. So I think, and so there was a lot of code switching, but I think these days a lot of brands, photographers, designers are talking more about their own history, and I think that is kind of the key to that's what Harold was saying before, like, it is really the key to any kind of success because you can only talk your own story and be honest. Like, I can't tell you your story, you know, so I can only talk about my own past as a Dominican, as, you know, a dancer, as whatever, you know, like, I can't talk about somebody else's stuff. And I think for younger creatives, I think people are understanding that more. That's what I think.
I think if we see the, Luar show or Willie Chavaria, that two important things happened during New York Fashion Week, which was Luar show closing New York Fashion Week, and Willie, the casting that you see there has been so different and so diverse. And on a personal note, I never would have imagined seeing their castings, even 5 years ago. Do you feel the same?
Well, yeah. It's also kind of gives me a little bit of hope that like these guys are doing it, and hopefully other people are watching, and they will continue on, and they don't stick to the same. Let's have one girl here or another one there. But yes, I mean it's super exciting to kind of see, and I never thought that I would ever see that.
Carla, perdón. Perdón que los interrumpa, vamos a iniciar la sesión de preguntas antes que se nos acabe el tiempo. Y yo, voy a hacer la primera pregunta. Karla no me dejará mentir que en mi carrera como periodista, yo siempre que iba a Nueva York en la Semana de la Moda, mi interés era buscar personajes latinos que trabajaran en la industria y era absolutamente complicadísimo. De hecho, Karla y yo comenzamos con el pie izquierdo porque yo la contacté para entrevistarla. Debido a la falta de recursos, el momento de la entrevista, como yo trabajaba para noticias, me quitan la cámara porque había un evento de noticias, un breaking news, y yo llamo a Karla y me disculpo de la manera más sincera posible, le envío un ramo de flores.
I worked at the New York Times, which is like the CIA in terms of getting an interview.
Y le dije, te ruego me disculpes, y dije, más nunca esta mujer me va a hablar. Pero creo que lo que estamos hablando aquí que es importante es nuevamente dar visibilidad al talento latino. Porque yo decía, ¿qué gano yo con ir a Nueva York a entrevistar a Marc Jacobs, que todo el mundo lo quería entrevistar? Si Marc Jacobs tiene miles de plataformas, pero de repente, quizás un Esteban cuando estaba comenzando u otro, no lo tenía. El mismo Ángel Sánchez, a quien amo y adoro, o sea, siempre buscaba estos talentos. Pero eso toma mucha convicción y mucho trabajo de campo. ¿Cómo hacen ustedes en sus respectivas tareas para plantarse y decirle a tu editor, I believe in this and I'm going for this? O sea, ¿es complicado o es una tarea que tú dices que hoy por hoy es mucho más fácil de hacerla?
I would say it's the hardest thing ever, trying to kind of convince someone to kind of move away from the same stereotypical thing. I don't know about your experience, but yeah, it's super hard.
I'm trying to understand the question. So, like, how do we stay true to our convictions, in a way? I don't know.
I think you, exactly what you said earlier is the projects you choose.
Yeah.
You don't want to just shoot
the
girl
that's
with
what
50 million followers.
That's actually, sí, completamente. Porque a veces, por ejemplo, tengo una oportunidad de hacerle foto a una persona que sea bien famosa y yo siempre me pregunto, ¿dónde, like, what is this gonna do for me? Not in terms of like, what am I gonna, I don't want to, I want to reframe what I just said. Like, how does this person represent me is what I want to say. Like this person is very famous, but I have nothing to do with this world. And it's not a world that I want to be a part of. And so I've said no to a lot of these opportunities. Not a lot, but like the opportunities that I've gotten in that, I've said no to because I just felt that that's not a person that I want to necessarily be aligned with. And for the people that I've worked with, like with the agents and stuff, sometimes it's a little shocking because they're like, oh, wow, but I don't know. I think that also comes with like life experience and being a bit older than a 20-year-old photographer.
I have a question, and it could be for any of you. So when Sammy and I created Laughs, and because we're talking about diversity, at least on my end, and I never thought like the only classism that I have encountered is from Latin America.
The only what?
Any classism or like people not wanting to support us, it has come from Latin America. And I like to be very blunt about it. You made a statement like, why don't we have a representation? And it's so interesting and it's a conversation that we need to be having. I emailed every single Dominican model to be here on stage with you guys. And I couldn't get any. Because all their agencies, they didn't even respond. Because I'm from Latin America. And it's a platform from Latin America. And I'm sure if it would have been BOF or Vogue USA or Harper's USA, they would have responded. But then, I emailed Carolina Kurkova, and she's flying here from the Oscars. Why do you think that is? And on someone like us, that here we are, and I would love to have there one of the Dominican models. How do we change that stigma? Because we have to talk about diversity, but like, for example, on my end, I'm getting the support from the other end. Like the real support. Like I have never been able to have a director from a department store from Latin America, ever. But we have here Amazon, luxury stores of Amazon, we have Nordstrom, we have, why is that?
Yeah, interesting. Actually, I spoke to Rose, and she had a visa problem, so she couldn't travel, but she actually was interested in being here. But yeah, it's interesting you say that, because even for myself, when I got invited to this thing, sometimes in general, it's very easy to get cynical when you are working within fashion and just be like, oh, I don't want to talk about me or whatever. But the reality is I do think that me as a Dominican from my specific background and the opportunities that I've been given, I think it would be selfish for me to not share my story, because I am in a unique position, I think, as somebody whose roots are in this place. And I think that a lot of people just get very cynical, and there is this idea, I don't know why, there is this idea of Latin America being less than, oh, it's not as important, it's not gonna give you any visibility, it's, like, what are they gonna do in the Caribbean? Like, oh, it's a small little thing. And I don't think they even take the time to do the research and understand what it is, and it's unfortunate, because I don't really know what the answer is, but it really stems from ignorance. It stems from ignorance, and I think maybe feel like they're protecting their model. Somebody like Carolina Kurkova, I mean, she's a huge model. She doesn't have anything to lose, in a way. Like she's huge. She can do whatever she wants, But maybe some of the other girls, they're like, oh, it's just a fucked up mentality. It's very problematic.
I think it's a lot. I don't know. I think we've always talked about this, and I think a lot of the times not to point them out, but even in the whole kind of Black Lives Matter and before that, and during Me Too, no one talked about the agencies. And I was saying on the phone with both of you, like, for me to shoot Linnacy, it's she had to do Vogue Turkey, she had to do Vogue Japan, because the reality is that a lot of, this is what someone explained to me, and I think it's part of it. There aren't these big beauty contracts in Latin America. You don't have, all the big kind of Korean cash jobs that they used to call them when I was working in New York and Japan. And so they're not getting this massive check. So there's really no incentive to do it, which is really unfortunate, because I don't see all those girls on, aside from someone like Mika that's been on the cover of Vogue France a million times. You don't even know what it took for me to get her to do our cover. And she's an Argentinian girl, and we have the second biggest audience of Vogue, at least the wholly owned ones. So that's a big. But even that was like, but I always say the story of Linnacy, because I had to beg, I can't remember her agent's name right now, but him to shoot her. And when we shot her, no, she didn't have 20 million followers like Taylor Hill, but she got a huge response because she wore her hair naturally curly on the cover, which was something that in this country was totally not accepted. Everyone's always trying to get their hair straightened, including myself. I think a lot of the times there's just this I always say it, and we were saying it yesterday with a friend's comment that we saw about the Oscars when a Mexican won. But I say it as in Latin America, we're our own worst enemies sometimes. We are the ones that are like pushing each other down because it's like we can't stand to see someone, you know, and it's bad. It's something that we have to change. And I think that's why when we're doing content, when you were saying that it's so hard every day, yeah, it's hard every single day to say, okay, make sure that that picture, when you're talking about, you know, dark skin melasma and dark skin, you don't have a redhead with melasma, you know, and those are things that you constantly have to be thinking about, like you said.
I mean, my answer is just people are so close-minded, and I don't know how to change their mind to think otherwise. But it is so important for us to keep talking about it and just have visibility, because, yeah, that's my answer.
Una más?
Hi, I'm an entrepreneur, born and raised in Panama, but with roots in Ecuador. I would like to get an advice from either one of you because I'm a one-man band in my business, because I've been 2 years in business. I'm a millionaire, or I own a hat business, and I'm the one who needs to choose who's going to be in my pictures wearing my hats, and who's going to be in my lookbooks, and so what advice would you give to me so my lookbook or my line sheet will look as diverse as our countries are, or how can my brand reflect Latin America without being fake? I think I've been trying really hard for my brand to look diverse so far, but how can I do it better? Or what would be a best practice for me to learn from you both?
I mean, for me, it's just kind of like look at your backyard. Like, even in this beautiful country, like I just was walking around, and there's so many different types of like people in itself, like skin tones, body size. Like, there's just so much different beauty that I would just say, like, look in your backyard, and you will be like, it will be so authentic. I feel like it will just be more staying true to yourself, if that makes sense.
And I think the fact that you're asking the question is already something. I think awareness is really key. It's quite shocking how many people live in such a bubble that, again, whiteness is the center. And we hear this word privilege, but privilege is really not having to be bothered, not having to really question it, because the world is centered around this very specific idea of beauty. And so even asking the question and asking yourself, like, who is my customer and what do I want to represent and who are the people that best represent that? And like you said, like looking in your backyard, and it's not about being fake, because if you really have the concern, then it's not being fake. You know, if you really have the concern, then you're already starting to do the questioning, which will lead you to the answers of how to best tackle the idea of representation within your own brand. I think so.
Yeah. Bueno, I'm sure there are more questions, so if you run into either of these two in the audience, don't be shy. Thank you so much.
Qué buena conversación, ¿o no? Yo creo que eso es lo más importante de LAF, que venimos aquí a aprender. Y este tipo de comunicación en la que tenemos una conversación y un discurso abierto y honesto de quiénes somos, no solamente como latinoamericanos, sino como región, es importantísima. Y regresamos nuevamente a la visibilidad. Y una cosa muy importante que recalcó Karla el día de hoy, que son cosas culturales que nosotros mismos tenemos que ser parte del cambio, es de apoyarnos mutuamente. mutuamente. Apoyarnos mutuamente y siempre ser generosos. Yo siempre digo que cada quien tiene su talento y hay mercado para todo el mundo. Así que bueno, les quiero recordar que vamos a tomar un pequeño break ahora, pero no dejen de ir, por favor, al pop-up, porque no solamente es apoyar, creo que también es comprar, porque esa es la mejor manera de apoyar a estos emprendedores. Y por supuesto, y por supuesto también, mira, está turizoneando, que es una actividad divertida, están estas pequeñas activaciones de tener como esto speed dating, y pierdan la pena, y si tienen alguna duda, acérquense a las personas que estuvieron en el panel y háganle directamente sus preguntas para que ustedes salgan más enriquecidos de acá. Esto apenas comienza, creo que hemos comenzado una antesala muy bien y nos vemos de regreso aquí a las 3 de la tarde. Que pasen un afternoon maravilloso. Thank you.
Our first block of panels for the day has concluded. If you are part of an intimate talk, check your agenda for location and head there. We will see you back here at 3 p.m. sharp for our next panels. Nuestro primer bloque de paneles ha finalizado. Si estás asistiendo a nuestras pláticas íntimas, revisa tu agenda para ver ubicación. Nos vemos aquí a las 3 p.m. para los próximos paneles.